Right. So you're writing your sci-fi, and you come across a paragraph where you're going to describe, some technology, maybe a hyperdrive or whatever. You're going to describe how a spaceship works or something. What you want to do then is put the familiar information first. So tell us things that most people would be familiar with, if there's anything at all that we're familiar with. Relate to us things about this technology that would make sense to us. There's probably things that you can like it unto. It's kind of like this, and so that would be giving us familiar information. That metaphor, that analogy, is giving us familiar information. And then you're going to start, after you have introduced us that way, by giving us an analogy. It's kind of like this, And then it's like, oh, okay, so the flying car is kind of like a car. Cool, so now I got familiar information out of the way, a car. And then you can start telling about this flying vehicle. The next thing is you want to use the simple information before complex information. The reason why is the more I understand about this new thing, the easier it is for me to understand it altogether. So how is the easiest way to get me to start understanding this new thing that you're trying to describe to me? You're trying to describe some new flying vehicle or something. It's telling me the simple information first. So tell me the things that are easiest to understand about it. Now I'm starting to paint a picture. I'm starting to grasp. I have familiar information that you've given me with analogies, that it's kind of like a car. I have simple information about this new thing that you're telling me about. That is, maybe the simple information is how it looks and how it flies, whatever. If it's a flying car, a time traveling device, you describe the simple stuff first. It has a door. You get inside of it. You turn this button on. Then you start describing the complex stuff, how it works, how it warps space time or whatever. However your time machine works. Also. And it's in this order too. You want to give us familiar information before new information first. Then you want to give us simple information before complex information. And then you want to give us short information before long information, which just simply means, that those parts that can be summed up quicker than other parts. So, but this comes after this. So if you have a slightly longer sentence, but that longer sentence happens to be the simple information, then you want to give us that simple long before you give us that short complex. So there's a hierarchy here. The simple information is more important than short information. So that's why I have it in this order here. And familiar information is more important than simple or short information. So this is the hierarchy. In other words, even if it's long but it's familiar, give us that first. But if you have more than one familiar, then give us the short familiar before the long familiar. Give us the short simple before the long simple. So, okay. I also wanted to give another example of nominalization. So you have here, Miss Ming had hopes that her brother would send a recommendation to the boss that he would take her into consideration for the position. One, this is hard to read. It's hard to understand. That's the worst thing about using a lot of nominalization. Sometimes they're good when used correctly, but this is not correct. This is horribly bad, really hard to understand. Because of all the nominalizations, you're having to use a lot of determiners or prepositions like for, into. And that's why I use the paramedic method, which will highlight these common prepositions so you can easily find if you have nominalizations. And also, it's good not to have too many prepositions in a sentence anyway. You don't want too many prepositional phrases, so you can often reduce those anyway and get rid of them and reduce them down to a different kind of phrase or just a noun. Okay, so we obviously have hopes, recommendation, and consideration. These can all be verbs. This can be turned to hoped. This can be turned to recommended. This can be turned into consider. Now watch how easier this sentence is to understand and read. Mrs. Ming hoped her brother would recommend to the boss that he consider her for the position. But we still have this preposition now. Can we remove it? And so this is why you want to use the paramedic method on the Master Edit software, because it'll highlight all these prepositions like for, and this makes it easier to find, your prepositional phrases. Can we reduce for the position to something? We can. He hire her. So Miss Ming hoped her brother would recommend to the boss that he hire her. There we go. And I wanted to give this other example because I wanted to give an example of like more academic writing rather than novel or story writing. So this is, not narration. Flow. Connect your sentences together not by using conjunctions like and, therefore, hence, but, however, etc., but by linking the ideas together. That is, use subordination. And we already went through a little bit about subordination. There's so much to say about subordination, so many examples. So I will spend now just a little bit of time going through some examples of how you can subordinate and the different kinds of subordinations, because learning how to subordinate is the most important thing you can ever do as a writer. You want to get good at writing complex sentences and writing good complex sentences. But before we do that, we can talk about this really quickly. Delete words that mean little or nothing. Delete words that repeat the meaning of other words. Delete words whose meaning a reader can infer. That is, the meaning is clear, it doesn't need to be stated. Then you're kind of like talking down to your reader. Replace a phrase with a word. Change negatives into affirmatives. Now these you can actually find in the Elements of Style. And you can get that free online too, so that's pretty cool. And if you want to look at more examples of these. But let's look at some examples of these before we get into like subordination. And how, using all these principles and examples. Susan actually liked Jim in the beginning of their relationship, basically based on certain factors like he was charming. This is how a lot of people talk. We ramble on. We use a lot of words that we don't need to use. We run on with these things like and basically and actually and things like that. It's easy to get carried away. We do it all the time. We don't want to bring that into our writing. We want a casualness to our writing, but we don't want it so casual that we ramble on like this. Actually doesn't need to be there. Basically doesn't need to be there. And based on certain factors like definitely doesn't need to be there. There's nothing casual about that. That's like academic crapola. It's not even good academic writing. It just sounds academic based on the fact that things like that they don't need to be there. So when we make this sentence lean and mean, that is, we follow all these suggestions that have been mentioned so far, moving from get from the subject, get from the subject to the verb to the object quickly. Don't interrupt them. Put interrupters at the end. If you do interrupt, then use a short one, so forth. Susan liked Jim in the beginning of their relationship because he charmed her. And there you go. I mean, you don't have to ramble on with all this other stuff that it doesn't add anything to the sentence. This sentence, and they say the same thing, except this gets to the point quicker. It's leaner, meaner, it's awesome, whatever. It's a better sentence. Sometimes, though, you might want to have something like actually, because it might add a slight different change or nuance, but you want to get good first at writing mean sentences, nice and lean sentences, and then you can start to add things like actually or whatever if you can kind of feel the tone that if it changes. Susan actually liked Jim in the beginning of their relationship because he charmed her, something like that. Then it might be okay. She tried to anticipate in advance. There's no need for this word, that's why I crossed it out. This is like it's repetitive. She tried to anticipate is already saying that it's in advance. So what he would do based on past history. Well, if it's past, then it's history. You're repeating yourself again, right? Not you, but I'm saying if you write something like this, it's repetitive. Okay, this ends this part. I don't have enough time to read this sentence, so come back for the next part, and we'll continue. And go ahead and click the link for Master Edit. Check it out. It's awesome. You can take it for a test drive.